Welcome back, Screenaholics. Today we are doing the top 10 A24 horror films. Now, A24 have some of my favorite horror films of all time. They do have other films as well. Definitely go and check out their whole entire spectrum of films covering so many different genres. But as far as horror, I feel like that is their top tier. That is what they do best. And some of their horror films, in my opinion, are some of the best films that have came out in the past decade, even outside of horror. So that means, they're doing something right. They're keeping this horror genre alive when it's a time when, horror is kind of, it sucks to say, but it's kind of fallen off. We're kind of getting these high production, just jump scare-ish kind of bleh, in the past decade. And I feel like A24 has done a really good job of stepping in and being like, hey, we're going to put out some very scary, very real, in-your-face sort of horror movies that not everybody tends to like, but if you do like it and you do sit down and give them a chance, you can see where these movies are just amazingly written and scored, and cinematography is amazing when it comes to them. So let's jump into this. And again, this is the top 10 best A24 horror films. Now, before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'm going to throw out some honorable mentions right now that did not make the top 10, but it's still some of them that, I like and thoroughly enjoy and will watch often. The first honorable mention is It Comes at Night. It is a horror film based around a family living in their cabin or house out in the woods, set in a zombie post-apocalyptic Earth where a zombie outbreak happened. Now, this one made honorable mention because, it could be better. There are things I like about it, but at the same time, it is kind of just centered around the family and the drama that has to do with them rather than it being more of a zombie film, but it's still a good watch, especially around Halloween time. Second honorable mention is Tusk. Now, I love Tusk. Kevin Smith is one of my favorite directors. I think Tusk is a absolutely amazing horror film. It is so funny. It is so in your face. It's so weird. But I just don't think it quite makes the top 10 here, but it's honestly one of the better horror movies and horror comedies I've ever seen, so check out Tusk if you like Kevin Smith and you like that type of comedy. Another honorable mention is High Life. High Life is a A24 science horror set in space. It's starring Robert Pattinson. It has Andre 3000 in it. Mia Goth is in it. It is a very good movie. It is a slow movie. Typical A24 kind of horror where it's a little bit slow. And it's not fully horror more as it is a sci-fi movie, but it is a sci-fi horror and it's a psychological horror at that. Very good. Definitely worth checking out. Another one is It Follows. Now, It Follows was number 10 on this list before a new movie just recently came out and replaced it. It Follows has a special place in my heart. I love that movie so much. It is so unique to itself. I felt like it really took on that indie feel. There are some parts that are kind of funny, but I feel like it's supposed to be on the nose. It's supposed to be blatantly telling you what this movie is. And so you take it for what it is. It is a really good horror movie, has some good jump scares, has a good story. It Follows is worth checking out. And our last honorable mention is Life After Beth. Now, Life After Beth didn't make the top 10 because it is strictly a horror comedy. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's about a couple who were dating and his girlfriend died and she came back to life. And it's kind of like this love romance, funny, set in this like zombie apocalypse that's about ready to happen. It's really, really good. It's not like Warm Bodies like that. It's more of like SNL kind of comedy, more like slapstick comedy a little bit. It's really good, and if you like horror comedy like Shaun of the Dead, you'll love Life After Beth. Alright, now getting in on our top 10, coming in at number 10 is Men, directed by Alex Garland. Now, like I just said, this replaced It Follows for my top 10. I've already done a video on Men. If you want to go check that out after this video, go ahead. It explains everything in the movie. It'll go into full detail. Since I've done a video on that before, I'm not going to go into full detail about Men. Like I said, it was directed by Alex Garland, who did Annihilation and Ex Machina, which are two very good films. Ex Machina is also an A24 film. So this is his second A24 film, and I feel like this is most ambitious. This is the most weird, the most horror, most graphic, and it is just absolutely bonkers. It just came out. It's probably still in theaters, so you can still go and check it out in theaters. If you like really gruesome, in your in-your-face social commentary type movies, Men is definitely for you. At number 9 is The Green Knight that came out in 2021, starring Dev Patel. You may remember Dev Patel from movies like Slumdog Millionaire and Chappie. He has done some really awesome things, and The Green Knight is one of them. Now, this movie, more of a fantasy medieval film than a horror film, but it definitely has horror aspects to it, and that's what I love. There's a lot of horror aspects. There's a lot of gore. There's a lot of like monster imagery. There's a lot of ghost imagery. So it has to do with like this kid who apparently is somehow related to King Arthur, and he takes on this green like monster, which is kind of, I guess, a green knight, and because of that, he has to go back in so many years and fight him again to prove that he is worthy of some kind. Now, Dev Patel's character takes a trip through all of these medieval places, coming across all of these different characters, and it's just really good. It is a long watch. I would say for somebody who probably enjoyed The Witch would probably enjoy this film. If you do like medieval stuff and you do like fantasy stuff, this is a movie you want to watch. It's pretty graphic though, but it's very good and it's worth watch, and it definitely is worth my top 10. Coming in at number 8 is Lamb from 2021. And this movie is starring the same girl that was in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. It is bonkers. It is wild. Now, this is a very slow movie. Now, again, it doesn't really hit on traditional horror, but psychologically it is. It's about this couple who lives in, I believe, the Isles of Ireland or Northern Ireland, somewhere out really far away in the hills next to the ocean. And they come across one morning of a half lamb, half human child, and they decide to raise it. They name it Ada. And from there, it's them raising it and them kind of going into like social commentary having to do with, I guess, like adoption almost, or, you know, that they're raising something that doesn't belong to them. And then at the end of it, it's just absolutely crazy. It's wild. Something happens. It catches you completely off guard. This movie's going to be a long watch. If you can sit through it, if you can get through the majority of the middle of the movie where it's kind of slowly, getting to its end, it's definitely up there. That's why I have it in my top 10, and definitely check out Lamb. Coming in at number 7 is Saint Maud from 2019. Now, it's set around a woman who is trying to live like this very Christian life, this, I think, Catholic life, almost like a nun, and she is staying with these people who are trying to help her kind of do that, but at the same time, they slowly devolve her into all of these different things that doesn't go with her religion, and she kind of like ties that into her religion then. Like, she starts to pull these darker things that she's doing into that being what God would want her to do, or that's what Jesus would want her to do. And it's just a absolutely crazy movie. It is very dark. It's very sinister. It gives you a lot of like Suspiria vibes, except without like the dancers and stuff like that. It's more set around like the religion aspect of it. And if you like Suspiria, you would like this movie. It definitely has some gruesome scenes. It is definitely horror in every sense. And it's definitely like a movie that will sit with you for a while. That's why Saint Maud's on this top 10 and so high up. Coming number 6 is the first kind of bigger movie, and that is Hereditary by Ari Aster. Now, Hereditary was Ari Aster's first A24 film. It's starring Toni Collette and Alex Wolff, who are absolutely amazing in this movie. If you've not seen Hereditary, I don't want to spoil a lot for it, but it's set around a family and kind of like this cult, and there's just a lot that goes on. Like I said, I don't want to spoil it for anybody. If you've never seen Hereditary, then go watch it right now. If you have, then you know what I'm talking about when I'm saying, man, there's a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, the telephone pole scene is one of the scenes in horror that's always stuck with me. That scene it caught me off guard. It's just crazy. And then from there, just the spiraling down throughout the storyline. When I tell you that this movie is a horror classic, it is a horror classic. It makes you feel like you're watching a classic old horror film with new imagery and like updated kind of gruesomeness to what we're used to today. And Hereditary is just one of those movies that will stick with you and is an absolute must watch around Halloween. Coming in number 5 is Climax from 2018. Now, there's not much to say about Climax. It's set around a dance group who's having like this big party, and it starts off and everybody's dancing and having a good time, and there's kind of this like choreography within the first scenes of everybody kind of doing their thing, and it feels like a dancing movie, like that's what it's supposed to be. And then it just completely spirals out of control and becomes like this drug-laced fever dream. Now, everybody in the group gets drugged without them knowing it, and they are all on LSD, and it is just wild, and everything just starts to go crazy from there. I'm telling you, man, this movie is wild. If you like really crazy, over-the-top kind of movies, it is... There's some points that you can kind of like laugh and be like, ah, that was sort of funny, but they do touch some really serious subjects, and at times it can get very, very dark. That said, the reason why it's number 5 is that it's just so unique on its own. It does kind of remind me of Suspiria, just like I said, Saint Maud, but I only slightly, just because of the dancing and stuff like that, but it is number 5 because it's such a unique movie and so wild that it's hard to just not think about it. Coming in at number 4 is Midsommar, or Midsummer, whichever way you want to pronounce it. As you can see here, I am wearing my Midsommar shirt. This movie was directed by Ari Aster. It is his second A24 film, coming off of Hereditary, which was a huge success for him. Everybody was waiting around being like, hey, what's he going to do next? What's he going to do next? And as soon as the trailer came out for this movie, we were like, wow, this looks way crazier than Hereditary. It's starring Florence Pugh and a bunch of other people, including the guy who plays Chidi from The Good Place, which is one of my favorite characters. But this is by far Ari Aster's best film out of the two. This movie took what Hereditary built, which was kind of like this storytelling, this great cinematography, making you feel for the characters, and then said, hey, let me just do the most crazy things I can think of. Let me make this a wild movie where the general public isn't going to absolutely love it just like they did Hereditary. Hereditary wasn't crazy enough where the general public wasn't gonna like it. They were gonna like it. They were gonna see it as a horror movie, and horror fans are gonna be like, this is a really good horror movie. But Midsommar, I feel like the general public can't watch that movie without turning it off. They're probably like, this movie is absolutely crazy. It's disgusting. There's crazy things happening. I don't want to watch this. But horror fans are like, this is awesome. This is exactly what we wanted out of Ari Aster's second full-length A24 film. And he did not miss it. I own the director's cut book of it, and it's easily one of the best horror movies ever made, in my opinion, and it just missed out on the cut of my top 3. Number 3, we have The Witch from 2015. Now, The Witch was directed by Robert Eggers, and it is that kind of first, I wouldn't say big A24 film, but that first A24 film that really kind of pushed them in the horror direction of being like, well, this is going to be like a big thing for us. Robert Eggers stepped in and did his thing on this movie, and I saw this movie in theaters when it first came out, and let me tell you, this movie had my mind blown. I'd never really ever seen a horror movie like it. It was so unique on its own. I did always like kind of storytelling horror movies. I was always a fan of Darren Aronofsky and Lars Van Trier, people who kind of took like art house approaches to horror films. But Robert Eggers did something in this movie that I had never really seen before, and that was take a period piece in kind of this witch movie and just make it, I don't know, ominous. Like, it wasn't a typical, like, witch movie. Like, you were expecting, like, The Witch to go into it and see, like, witches and stuff like that. And no, it had nothing to do with that. It was centered around a singular family who got outcasted from their town. And it was just, I don't even know. I don't even know how to explain it. It's so good. Now, this is like Anya Taylor-Joy's like kind of first big break. This was like that first big horror film that she was ever in, which led to her being in a ton of movies since then. But this one really stuck out. Her performance was amazing in it. Everybody's performance was amazing in it. Black Phillip is like one of my favorite iconic horror characters now. Like, the Black Phillip goat is one of the coolest things that came out of horror recently. Coming in at number 2 is a very recent film, and one that I've already done a review on, and that is 2022's X, that was directed by Ti West. Now, this was Ti West's first A24 film. I was a huge fan of his previous films like House of the Devil and The Sacrament, But those were A24. This was his first A24, this first big break for him, and he knocked it out of the park. Now, like I said, I already did a review of this, so if you want to go watch that after this, you can. And it'll explain everything having to do with the movie, but just let me say this is a modern-day 70s style horror film. Very Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque. The cinematography is amazing, the gore is amazing, the story is amazing. It has amazing characters like Mia Goth and Kid Cudi in it, and it is just... It's a wild film. I know I say that about all of these are wild, because A24 films, horror movies, are pretty wild. But this one, I mean, as soon as I got done watching it, I thought to myself, this is one of the best horror movies that's came out in the last decade or two. This movie is by far horror at its finest, and Ti West did such a good job. It is phenomenal, and that's why, you know, it's made my top 2, because that movie just stuck with me. And finally, we are now at the number 1 A24 horror movie, and I'm sure, since you know I have not said it yet, you know exactly what I'm going to say, and that is The Lighthouse. Now, The Lighthouse came out in 2019. It is Robert Eggers' second A24 film. His first was The Witch, which also made my top 3. And the reason why this is number 1 is, I mean, tell me a movie that's like it. You can't. If you can, comment down below. If you think there's a movie that's like it, comment down below. But if not, comment down below and tell me what you loved about The Lighthouse or what you didn't love about The Lighthouse. But the reason why it's number 1 to me was when somebody would go and pitch a movie to a studio, A24 excluded, and they say, hey, so what we're going to do is we're going to have Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. They're going to play 2 characters, or pretty much the only characters in the entire movie outside of one woman who plays a mermaid. And we're going to set them in the early 1900s on an island by themselves in a lighthouse. And it's going to be shot in almost 1:1 aspect ratio. And it's going to be black and white. Those people are probably going to be like, you're out of your mind and we're not doing that. You're crazy. We're not doing that at all. That's not going to sell. That's not going to do well. Well, A24 decided to say yes to this, greenlight it. And Robert Eggers and his brother worked on it together. And came up with this movie that is automatically, in my opinion, a horror classic, a film classic, and something that will probably be in like the Criterion Collection at some point. This movie is long. It is hard to watch, but every single moment will have you at the edge of your seat waiting for what's going to happen next. And it's all about the downfall of these 2 guys. There's nothing really crazy horror-esque about it, but it is just that like sinisterness and that like creepiness of what's going on and seeing their minds just going. Like they slowly just devolve into these crazy beings throughout the movie from where they began. If you've never seen this movie, you need to go watch it right now, because it's one of the best movies ever made in my opinion. It is actually my second favorite movie of all time. That's how good this movie is. And even if you're not a horror fan, you can love this movie. There's things about it you can love. There are funny parts of this movie. There are gruesome parts of this movie. There are sad parts of this movie. There are crazy parts of this movie. There is everything you could ever want in a film, and that's the reason why it's number 1. The Lighthouse, I don't know if anything will ever be able to touch that A24 puts out. And if they do, then good for them. But this movie, I'm telling you, when I saw it in theaters, I walked it out of the theater and said, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think, in my opinion, it's the number 1 A24 horror film. Alright, that does it for this top 10 list. Thanks for joining me, and we will be back soon with some more movie reviews.